Good evening. I'm really very excited to be here tonight. And I'll do my best to be less excited because I was checking my heart rate. It was around, truly saying from the data, it was around 122. So I'll be very calm to respect this beautiful place. And a very, very thank you to NGV and Telestron for everyone that supported to be here tonight with you. Tonight, I would love to share the journey in 3 chapters, very early works that are, I think, helped me to be here today with you, and the founding studio, and then the last was Machine Intelligence. I was born in Istanbul, Turkey, where it was a very interesting place to be. First of all, west and east, left and right, black and white. Many years of layers of culture were like added to each other. And it was a very interesting feeling because based on my mother's also memories, I was always like sometimes like bored with like a design culture that is sometimes like very limited by the boundaries of the like years of his experience. I think that's one of the reasons, most likely, I was hooked by the architectural photography. I found truly excited that through the eye of the lens, this is the moment. I was somehow trying to like go to this level of like new time and space, try to like have a sanctuary that is very different than, I think, this. So like trying to find those like nuances. And something very exciting happened back in like 2009. As an undergrad student for my scholarship, I have to babysit 300 artworks in a museum. It was a very interesting challenge because if you think about like one of the early examples of media art, back in from like 70s, 80s, Peter Weibels, Jeffrey Shoves, and many other legendary minds who have invented some ideas with the technology and art, I was very like lucky to like really work with those minds. And around those days, there's a very like an interesting moment happened because I was just following in Europe and like many events and exhibitions. I met this wonderful group of people, also like where like Dan Rosgar was also like there as a participant. There was a wonderful event was talking about the idea of a media architecture. The idea was embedding media arts into architecture. So in Istanbul, I was babysitting 300 beautiful artworks. They are called media arts. And in Berlin, I saw this wonderful idea of media architecture. And then suddenly, like this idea of like this embedding media arts into architecture, some truly incredible, inspiring journey. And during those studies, I was very also fortunate to meet with Lev Manovich, and he has a wonderful quote. And as an undergrad, it was a very like aha moment in the library. He was saying, in other words, architects along with artists can take the next logical step to consider the invisible space of electronic data flows as substance, rather than just as a void, something that needs a structure, politics, and poetics. It was a beautiful write-up that was truly opening the mind as a student. And since then, I guess, I found that one of the most divine material that we have, I think, in our hands and in our life, that as we all know that if there's no sun, probably we are not here. And I found that moment of like, what will happen? On the left side, we are seeing a contemporary art museum. On the right side, we are seeing a 200 years old electric turbine. And I thought that maybe this may be the first canvas to augment by using the data of the architect and using a one-channel projection and a custom software developed by using VVVV. It was a very like an exciting first steps, and I was able to like transform a building by literally simply understanding how light and architecture can merge in real time. So I wasn't excited about just non-linear storytelling. I was also excited about how a machine maybe help us to narrate a space. So this was Sanaa's collaboration. It was also another exciting one. On the upper row, you are seeing their beautiful drawings of the building. On the lower side, my interpretation of like transforming their existing space and their ideas that couldn't happen due to the nature of physical quality of life. And then in the same, like 1 year later in 2011, there was a wonderful moment that from the Istanbul Biennial curators, they were asking for another challenging project. Curators are always challenging artists in a way that I think make us really excited and hopefully push our boundaries. And here there was the question of what will happen? The city is one of the most excited street, 1.4 kilometer, almost sometimes in the weekends there's almost 2 million, up to 3 million people in some days were occupied. And I thought, what will happen if we have a chance to get the data of the sound of the street? The protest, all religious inputs, people's cheer, anything that just street basically captures. It was my very first data sculpture using sound as an input in collaboration with Alper Remboas, an architect friend. We were able to capture a 3-dimensional data sculpture on the facade of a cultural building. what was fascinating in here, there's a camera on the upper right of the building, and it was trying to capture the everyday life patterns of the streets, such as a tram comes and an interaction starts with the piece. I was almost like inspired by the idea of a dialogue instead of just a one piece of action. And it was a very interesting moment that seeing people's reaction for such a like an unexpected journey and in kind of an alphabet, in kind of a language between data, which is the input of the machine, and their self as a scissors of the street, and also seeing light as a material that is transforming itself. This project you are seeing is done only in 3 weeks. So in 3 weeks, programming, commissioning, building, learning, algorithmic design, and everything. So that 3 weeks was something stressful, I would like to say again. And the other part was really getting me much more excited about these limitations about like this medium. But I was also very excited about the potentials of how we are connected to each other. And I was much more diving into this idea of how it started, like how we become much more connected. And we are pretty sure that satellites right now are one of the reasons that are like connected to each other every single day. And I was also getting much more excited about the science fiction itself, and heavily like try to imagine what will happen in the near future and how this kind of like technology is allowing us to become something else. And if you look at from much more like the patterns of like who we are and how we are becoming something else, is something also interesting. I want to read a very important text from the book called What Technology Wants from Kevin Kelly. He says, scientists had come to a startling realization. However you define life, its essence does not reside in material forms like DNA, tissue, or flesh, but in the intangible organization of the energy and information contained in those material forms. And as technology was unveiled from its shore of atoms, we could see that at its core is about ideas and information. Both life and technology seems to be based on immaterial flows of information. It was a beautiful, I think, insight that what exactly happening to us too. So I'm pretty sure that also, I think one of like another exciting thought that I found exciting from Luc Dubois, and he was saying every civilization will use the maximum level of technology available to make art. And it is the responsibility of the artist is to ask questions about what that technology means and how it reflects our culture. And if we look at today, like I think pretty many of us is in this mindset, which is I think sense of displacement, the feeling of like we are there or not. Like I'm very openly and personally saying I have the same interesting state of thinking, and this actually like find me like very much more looking at the patterns of humans, machines, and environments. And as we all know, like this John Mayer's also beautiful quote about design is a solution to a problem, art is a question to a problem. And from this mindset, this lady is from 2016, the most shared problem, or maybe not. But I thought that she should be my audience. And respectfully, many other artists who have been like doing beautiful work from sociocultural and political and many other deep topics. But I thought that she may need something maybe much international. And also, we are all aware of that, like, and from the museum's point of view, and the gallery's museum of views, the question is it possible to find ways to make people themselves more engaged with and ultimately responsible for the space that they inhabit? So simply, from those like very critical contexts maybe, I found that colliding physical and virtual world perhaps allow us to create new experiences. I was 8 years old when I watched the Blade Runner, the movie that truly changed my life. I was super excited, and I wasn't knowing English at all, but my mom was saying, like, just watch it, it's just culture. And then it was very interesting, and it was exciting. She was very right, because a flying car next to a media facade, it was just in 2019 Los Angeles. It was truly very exciting night. And the same summer, I also got my first computer, Commodore 128. It was truly like a Blade Runner year and just playing games. I think that's one of the reasons that I found myself in Los Angeles, hooked up subliminally, the city that right now like that. I mean, there's no way that any like flying cars or something like that. But I also found as a beautiful journey and a reason to leave my parents, friends, loved ones to make something purposeful and impactful for my life. So I thought that instead of going to a gallery or museum path, what will happen if I stay outside and just work for the public space and do things that doesn't have an entrance. It doesn't have a door or a wall or a ceiling or a floor. I think that everyone can engage with that. And I was very obsessed with architecture from the photography background. And I was very much looking all this beautiful research from the beautiful minds that I studied, like Le Corbusier. And he has this very exciting quote. And he was saying, architecture is judged by eyes that see, by the head that turns, and the legs that walk. Architecture is not a synchronic phenomenon, but a successive one, made up of pictures adding themselves one to the other, following each other in time and space like music. And suddenly, I was in Los Angeles, waiting to be starting my journey, and I found this beautiful building. As you may know, Frank Gehry's Walt Disney Concert Hall, the home of LA Philharmonic, last 15 years. I thought that what will happen, this building has kind of like a consciousness that can hear itself. Because at night, it's so sad, it's so alone. Sometimes there's no light. But in the daytime, it's touristically beautiful cultural beacon, and of course, home of LA Phil. When I say this, hey, can I do that? First question, Frank Gehry I emailed Frank Gehry directly, and I emailed LA Philharmonic. And my thesis committee said, so Frank Gehry will never reply your email. LA Phil never have a time for you as a student. You don't even have a permit to work. How on earth you can cover this building? So simply, I was just stuck in this reality of being foreign and many others. But 1 year later, I was on the stage next to Bill Gates and many other people from Microsoft Research. Every year, 10 Ivy School come together to present their ideas, mostly pitching design ideas, very cliche, 8 minutes long elevator thing. But my mentor, Christian Moeller, said, just go by yourself, don't bring a keynote, be whatever you want to do, just you're an artist, don't worry about those things. I didn't wear anything, I was on my short, by the way. I didn't understand how important. And then it was very interesting because it was the first time an art project got an award, a very large amount of financial support. And the next day when I go to LA, I got mail from Frank Gehry's office. So that's how, thank you. So there was a very beautiful day because I was just so different and I'm going to school different. So I got graduated with this project, and the beautiful thing happened is I was able to graduate and have a chance to work. And the first project that I got was LA Philharmonic said, all right, we have a challenge for you. What will happen in just a couple of months? You just take over the interior space of the Disney Hall. Frank Gehry is giving you the 3D file of the interior too. It was a beautiful support came from Esa-Pekka Salonen, the Finnish conductor and the laureate conductor of LA Philharmonic. He said, let's put together a piece in 25 minutes using what is this Americ piece, using 110 musicians and the empty walls of the Disney Hall. So what I thought, in 3 weeks, just very quickly understand the 3D model of the building and transform it into a 3-dimensional surface. So the project you are seeing is a real-time augmentation of the walls of Disney Hall by getting 8-channel real-time music and the conductor's body motions. It's truly aligned to the surface of the building. And it was a 25 minutes long, 3,000 people watching. And it's one of the first examples of using real-time graphics and data inputs. And for LA Phil, it was a beautiful risk to take because using such a conventional medium, such as classical music, and colliding with media arts and technology was a pretty strong risk to take. And for me, I was shaking because the thing you are watching is one of the most cutting-edge computational challenge that we had been discovering, and you have only one computer that you are running all these things, no backup. And it's my first project right after graduation. All my thesis still looking like that. So the beautiful thing happened is, of course, the building was not designed for projection, because Gehry or maybe team didn't at least think about for near future about embedding projection. So the projectors that you are watching here is in a room like this. So we are in a room. And with those machines, try to project onto the surface of the walls and try to augment the entire surface. And this was interesting because next day, we got a beautiful reviews. And most importantly, I think it was my birthday night, I was able to meet Frank Gehry, Esa-Pekka Salonen. And it was that moment when you have a dream of combining and colliding interdisciplinary thinking was a beautiful moment. But the feeling is a little bit better than this. It's like this because it truly helped to open our studio that I would love to talk about the other second chapter of the presentation. So it opened almost 2015 early, and last 3 years and 4 years is really exciting. Tonight I want to show you several projects that truly help us to allow us to grow into this direction. These are the wonderful minds and souls that I'm working together last 4 years, and thanks to them, it's not a one-man show at all. There are so many beautiful minds that are supporting this journey, but specifically thanks to all of them, that we have been like with AI engineers, architects, designers, coders, and graphic designers. We are just a bunch of like people trying to solve the near future and the question of what does it mean to be a human in 21st century. The interesting slide I want to show you here is a cliche startup slide that shows the companies that we are working. No, it's not like that. So this slide is very interestingly showing that we all somehow use knowledge or technology or algorithm or a data or hardware or software somehow with those people. It's pretty interesting to see the same pattern. And if we know that, the 2011 project that I was able to like use data, I was getting much more serious about this question of what does information and specific data means. And we all know that every day we create an enormous amount of data. So far, 2.5 petabytes of data daily, which is the 90% of the data in the world today has been created in the just last 2 years alone. So basically, our humanly experience of information, knowledge, and wisdom process is not truly applied all the time to the like field of data. If you're excited about that, I just every year look for this. What happens in the internet in just 1 minute is ridiculously insane. So those numbers are what's going on in just one single minute. And this data is eventually somewhere stored. And somehow this data is every year getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So time domain for data is enormously high. And we were like discussing about what exactly happening, not only in the mind of a machine, but the amount of energy that those machines are like ridiculously excelling is something very important to, I think, worry. So I was just looking all this like information about like how to just understand the data as a substance, and somehow that is not needs to be recovered by just I think predictable data science, but something that may be used as a substance, as like a pigment in the art, in the context of that. And I was super excited about Kierkegaard's vision. He says, life only can be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. I think it's exactly what we are leaving behind us on those machines, all our decisions, our likes, shares, and everything we divide, we somehow like left behind us is exactly, I think, the same idea of to understand that. So in the United States, there is this wonderful rule and law. Every state, every building in real estate development has to give 1% of the budget of the building to art. And this money goes to the city, and city puts together like a regulation team, and then they like democratically give you a chance for artists to compete. And this was my very first competition in 2014. And the idea was in a lobby of a building, and here there was this chance of using a built environment as a canvas in a building where Salesforce is now living. And the idea was using real-time data from the source of where they are coming from. Another rule since 2009, every city in the United States has to open source their data publicly. So I thought maybe public data for public art can be a way to understand that. So this project was the very first challenge of like understanding how to work with three-dimensional information, but also how to go expand and beyond just the screen and conventional screen and make a three-dimensional approach and transform into a living data sculpture. So the work is running every day from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. We'll be running for next 15 years. I want to read a very exciting text that I really excited about, Memo Akten, a friend who is a wonderful programmer, designer, artist, and many, many other like wonderful mind that's contribute to open source culture. He said, data dramatization as opposed to data visualization presents a data set with not only legibility or clarity, but in such a way as to provoke an empathetic or emotive response in its audience. To dramatize data, you must first understand it. You analyze it, play with it, try to find relationships, try to infer the events that took place, and extract stories and meaning. And then you throw it all away, chuck it in the bin, and wipe your hands clean. All that's left is your understanding of the processes that gave rise to the data and the events and relationships within. Then you create something new. from scratch. And I think it's a very similar approach that I wasn't anymore concerned about like really can we like recover data? Like do we really, for example, this is a real-time Twitter application. Every single night we collect almost 400,000 individual tweets. And every night this data turns into these landscapes based on the geolocation of where people are sharing their memories. So basically there are these moments of like really creating a kind of a new poetry and a kind of a poetic exploration of what is hidden in the mind of those machines and how we can use them as a substance for this context. So this project was one of like the early example of like trying to like as a studio understand how cities are living. For example, in Los Angeles, we were able to get the real-time public transportation data like a living vein of the city. And then also exciting thing was going on. Another, for example, competition happened from Boston. And there I was very excited about the idea of using wind, like the Monet, how he's inspired from the atmosphere. What will happen if we're able to get the data from the airport and somehow try to like control a kind of an algorithm that is mostly designed for moving for other reasons of moving some fluid simulations and things that are normally designed for something else. But try to create the invisible patterns of wind data by using the algorithm that you are seeing here. It was a very quick exploration. It only took maybe like 4 months to understand like what does it mean to have a 1 year of data and chop it into seasons and then kind of recover those information into a painting context. And it was really exciting because this idea of a frame and an algorithm and framing and data was the obsession since 2011. And I was very lucky to improve this idea of like using data and inform these height maps, which are very interestingly used in also like games and the movies that are creating those like mountains and oceans and clouds. Very simple idea that also applied to this. And at the end, it turned into a two-dimensional, but it's very funny. Black Mirror soundtrack is playing, but it's much more, I think, positive than the Black Mirror's thing. So what you are seeing is a 2 vector coming to the city of Boston from the Fun Pier and creating those vectors, and their drawing is like basically creating a spring season wind patterns. And this also like applied to other cities, and then I was able to like understand much different problems of wind. For example, it can come from multiple dimensions, and this an algorithm specifically customized by our studio, writing some really heavy code, and that what you are seeing is basically a 3-dimensional wind pattern turning into a data painting. And I just want to read this from the Philip K. Dick. Reality is that which doesn't go away when you stop believing it. A simulation is that which doesn't stop when the stories go away. Stories are responsible to our human desire for resolution, but a simulation is responsible only to its own laws and initializing conditions. A simulation has no moral, prejudice, or meaning. Like nature, it just is. I found it very inspiring, and I found that maybe wind has the same maybe quality of thinking. And then even right now, we are also able to like visualize different patterns of like information, such as the LTE signals, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and many others. The idea of what place senses. So while all this going on, something really exciting happened, which is the last part of the presentation. This is the most cliche image when you write AI at Google. And I think 2016 was a very exciting year, but 2015 is much more exciting. Did you remember this image by anyhow? So this image is one of the most shared image that is also AI tech in 2015 July. A Google group of engineers, by wrong, published a blog post. And it was about an algorithm called Deep Dream, an algorithm that by accidentally discovered a neural network normally trained for image recognition, and by somehow those wonderful minds were experimenting an idea called backpropagation, basically looking back how the machine learned, and those hallucinative images were suddenly leaked to a Google blog, and they have to like talk about it for a very long time. It was an inspiring point for many artists and engineers, and they're also the very first group of team who released their code publicly, which was a very important moment. And there was also like a follow-up with last 2 years and 3 years, an explosion of like algorithms that are constantly changing. And last night, I have to be in that conference, but of course it's a beautiful moment that I kindly reject and be here. But last night something happened at NVIDIA's event, and it was this.
Let's try and
Can we
darken
open the
it up a
sound?
bit, some cloud. Oh, that's wonderful.
Much more.
What if we were to change all that to rock?
Okay, let's click on rock, and we gotta replace the mountain.
Let's try waterfall just by pulling water down from the top there.
Okay.
Wouldn't it be great if everybody could be an artist? If we could take our ideas and turn them into compelling images? This technology allows us to create a smart paintbrush so that if you wanted to create a new picture, you can just draw the shapes of the objects that you want, and the neural network can then fill in all the details. If we add a water feature, the network is able to add reflections, not because we told it that, but because it learned it. Or if we change the ground to be covered in snow, then it knows that the sky also needs to be a different color. I really think this technology is going to be great for architects, designers, people making virtual worlds to train robots and self-driving cars. The input to this model is something we call a segmentation map. It's like a coloring book picture that describes here's where a tree is, here's where the sky is, here's where the ground is, and it doesn't have any details. And then the neural network is able to fill in all the texture and shadows and the colors based on things that it's learned from a large database of real-world images.
I would like to see that tree reflecting in that pond.
The real advance here is that we're able to synthesize images with a lot more diversity and more fidelity than we were able to in the past. I really think this technology is going to be great for the dreamers of the world.
So this happened last night, and this is literally like a revolutionary moment if you think about like the computational power that is coming up. But what does it mean to have these tools available for everyone? And we are very aware of that. Any technology, like finding the fire, cooking a food, and making a gun is not so different than finding an AI and using for something else. So this is what happened in just 1 year. I mean, all these problems we had seen, ethical issues about the machine intelligence. But I was just more like about like this ramification is something, yes, we are aware of that. But also if you look at like this, like the same movie, I'm coming back again. But this flying car is not anymore a science fiction, right? Like this summer, we have this project that is literally approved by the city of San Francisco, TFX. And then the Lilium jet, which is literally this summer coming up to fly in the city of San Francisco, the flying car idea. Cortana has 8 languages that can like have an emotion recognition filters. Amazon Alexa has a 46 seconds, the world's fastest, like with one click available thing that help you to buy whatever you want. And then Siri has a 21 language that can like compute, kind of have a dialogue with you. And unfortunately, there's those weird deep mind stories about like how human versus machine and those like sad stories. And then at the meantime, all like these incredible scientific minds, neuroscience or like any nanotechnology, people are trying to find the material that can compute. So I was super inspired while, like these are all just last year's news, nothing like so back, like just 12 months. And of course, Elon Musk's dream about like uploading data to someone's mind, which just for $27 million. So while all this going on, something very exciting happened. A call came from Google's group called Artists and Machine Intelligence, founded by Blaise Agüera-Arcas. And he has a one great vision about that. Like the invention of applied pigments, printing press, photography, and computers. We believe machine intelligence is an innovation that will profoundly affect art. And I highly believe what they were like trying to say. If you look at how like actually AI art and creative process works, based on Ahmet Algamaz's beautiful like simple chart, basically artist role is everywhere. Because we eventually need an input, which is data set, to tell the story and narrate that whatever that like context. And then we need a tweaking point of when AI learns from this data information, and this information specific like goes into those like decision like channels. And at the end, literally after the post-creation, at the end we have this art experience or creative experience. I think it's a very important like thing to understand. The machine's mind is, as J. Fried Foster says, the image of the world around us which we carry in our head is just a model. Nobody in his head imagines all the world, government or country. He has only selected concepts and relationships between them and uses those to represent the real system. So from those inspirations, I had a very great opportunity and invited from a library from Istanbul. And the library was funded by a great creator, Vasıf Kortun, and he was heavily dreaming about sharing the library open source for everyone from any age. And they were 3D They have 3D models, 2D files, images, documents of 1.7 million documents. And this story was one of my much exciting stories about the idea of inventing the future of library, a place where information turns into knowledge. So from that, I was very fortunate to work with the team and create a kind of a library that you go through the door, and when you go inside, there is no floor, there is no ceiling. What happens in front of you is the entire archive of the images goes through neural networks, which are used for many surveillance events, but we basically use them to literally analyze what that archive means. And this feeling of, interestingly, when machine learns, this information goes to a space called latent space, which is a latent means literal data is standing there unless you ask a question. And data doesn't need to be there in 3-dimensional like our world, it can be multi-dimensional. And the algorithm called TSNE was allowing us to get those multiple dimensions into an understandable, just 3-dimensional data universes. With just one line of code, you can take an entire archive, which is 1.7 million documents, without any search bar, you can see this knowledge in one kind of a 3-dimensional form. So what you see here is the video of witnessing a machine learns in front of you, and then gives you a data universe. We can increase the sound. I mean, the big question, what happens there is no search bar, right? And how we can learn when we go to a library, we know everything about that. Like how we can feel about that big picture, that everything in that space just invisible and visible somehow to you. So I found that it's a very interesting speculation. Once machine becomes our partner, not like those evil stories or like other critical problems, but has a huge capacity to literally become our part, to learn faster and see beyond just a search bar logic. And I think the big question is how we know we learned something, right? How do we understand we know everything about that specific topic? And I think seeing those connections and these invisible patterns was something really fascinating. And most importantly, not only just a video, you can also, without any search bar, by using a simple tablet, you can see the entire universe. With simple click, you can touch every single document and feel it, pause it, and literally save for you, and research in a whole new dimension in the mind of a machine. It was a pure artwork, doesn't require to be a research machine or a project at all, but interestingly, in just 4 weeks, more than 16,000 researchers used as a tool, an art project. And most importantly, if a machine can learn, can it hallucinate? And those are all imaginary documents completely made up by the machine's algorithm called DCGAN. And 2 years ago, this algorithm was one of the most exciting inventions in the field of AI, that when it learns, it can create almost real any output. So also, I think a month ago, a group just sold one image like that in $500,000 in an auction, the same code. But beyond that, what happens of this data universe? Does it really need a physical space? Can we touch and feel this world without those boundaries of the physical space? And we invented also a tool in VR that you can literally fly in the mind of a machine, and as a researcher in this library, stop anywhere and touch it in document and just read it and save it, maybe feel the thing that you learned from that knowledge. So what he is doing right now is literally flying and pointing out the information he is looking for. And he can even switch between different data universes and understand different type of documents, graphics, images, videos, or many other things. It's the first time 1.7 million document was able to stored in a GPU, another invention really that haven't been done in the studio. So this was a really profound project for studio that we learned what does it mean to work with machine intelligence. And it was a beautiful transformation of information, but I was just not ready for this truly understanding what does machine intelligence means. I had this another childish dream. Did you watch the new Blade Runner 2049? There is this amazing character called Memory Maker. And I was so much inspired by not that only specific moment, but way back in, I think, my childhood. I was always trying to think about where memories are coming from. Can we touch them? Can we feel them? And I think one of the most, in this world, that probably the most precious thing that we still hold them, our memories and emotions are very precious to look for. So last year, there was a wonderful moment with the collaboration with Adam Ghazali from Neuroscience Department of UCSF. As a studio, we were able to learn how to use complex EEG device designed for pretty complex neuroscience research. And the idea was, can we look for the pattern of remembering? But there was a beautiful research going on in the studio, and we learned that, of course, there's a potential. Once we have a big data of other memory recordings of John Doe's, we thought breaching the privacy of what does it mean, try to understand, can we somehow measure and felt and record the moment of remembering? And based on the memory research, we learned that there is 3 states that you can literally understand the activation of a memory happening on our minds. In 2016, there was a wonderful research happened. A group of researchers also released a fantastic code that those EEG signals, I mean, at the end, we are electric signals, right? I mean, when we hear a beautiful music, we have these goosebumps, and it's not just different than a kind of electric signals. And what this algorithm does is, if you have a clear idea of what you are looking for, it was able to give us outputs. And those outputs turn into a 3-dimensional reliefs of those specific memories. Specifically talking about a project that I called Melting Memories. It was a project that happened last year, and we will be watching a short clip about the project's installation called Engram, which means in neuroscience, memory. So what you are watching is a moment of remembering from a hippocampus to lower left lobe of our brain from a top view, and specifically a moment of remembering stretched in time to 2 minutes. It was one of the first examples of applying also trompe-l'oeil, an effect that truly makes a flat screen in 3-dimensional, the capacity of our perception of understanding or materialization of a memory. What was really, really exciting about the project was, while being able to look at the pattern of truly what does it mean to be a human, one of our precious information, and one of the most hopefully private information, and try to, like, without breaching the path of privacy, staying on the top, and just trying to understand that we are basically have a very similar patterns and similarities once we look at those information. So the exhibition was open only for 4 weeks, and we had around like 40,000 plus people came from a very small place. It was a very exciting moment because from any age, any background, there was this moment of like try to find meaning in such an algorithm and try to probably like make this new juxtaposition between a kind of a new language. A very like space of, let's say, monolith moment maybe, in a like kind of a way that you are witnessing kind of a piece that is just try to like say something about like who we are. And the music you are hearing done by Kerim Karaoğlu, and he used complete data sonification and complete done by the same data patterns that are like moving the specific moment of image. And this journey was very interesting because it was my very first gallery piece in many years, because going from the public space, like working without doors and ceilings and like anything, working in a gallery or like a built environment was something very different. And I was so lucky that I felt connected, but I also saw this problem, you remember, like a sense of displacement. It exactly happened. So people were just on the phones, they were just like sharing. But and right after that, you remember the project that I got rejected from the Gary and LA Phil, the Disney Hall project, right? So this last project I want to share very quickly with you to sum up this journey. So that project that I was dreaming about, what will happen if a building can dream? Like if it cannot learn, like can it remember? And that was that question somehow remembered by Frank Gehry and LA Philharmonic. This was their 100-year celebration, and they invited to come and think about what will happen, this idea of synesthetic architecture. Synesthesia is a kind of a phenomena that many serious amount of people have this issue, or a beautiful thing that for me that I'm thinking, that colors may be heard and sounds may be seen. It was an interesting phenomenon that I highly believe that was a big inspiration for the moment. So this idea to make the building dream, the first thing, of course, I asked LA Philharmonic, can we touch your memories? So there is 100 years of information, or around 44.5 terabytes. Every single document, every single performance done around the 100 years of their journey is perfectly recorded. Starting back in 1919, they had around 77,000 of sound recordings. If you want to listen them, it will take 17 years. And they have just in the building, last 15 years, they recorded 500,000 images. Every single memory they recorded from before, after performances. All like events happen. They have around 90,000 video clips. Each is minimum 2 hours. And they have enormous amount of a personally written, very early databases of their early performances, conductor, composer, artist, and the commissioner. And of course, Frank Gehry's files. So with this data, I was fortunate to create a story by using 3 chapters. The very first chapter was memory, what I thought was very humanly moment of this idea of instead of making humans more machine, can we make machines more human, and then maybe we can use architecture as a canvas for that. And the second part was consciousness, where the AI comes in the game and look at those patterns. And the third was dream, where exactly the building starts maybe giving a kind of a consciousness with this information. To make this project happen, we have to use 42 projectors, the world's brightest projectors, from multiple locations to be able to truly augment the skin of the building, kind of a material that can compute. The original 3D model of the Frank Gehry was back in 2002. There was no way to use that model to make something with that, based on the almost 17 years ago, the capacity of the softwares. So we have to take the model and completely remodel the building again and create a kind of a new skin on top of it with multiple layers. And the algorithms we used this time was much interesting. We were able to use one of the most exciting image recognition algorithms to really look at the entire corpus of LA Phil data. The first thing we look at is all of their individual handwritten database. Back in 1990 to now, we look at every single artistic performance and kind of create this 3-dimensional tunnel, a kind of a time and space tunnel, an iris that you can fly in, 2001 inspiration, but it's also a 3-dimensional that you can look from different angles. It was kind of creating a data sculpture by looking at those patterns of the organization. And this was very interesting because this later on was the big question of what happens if AI goes to a performance, what it sees, what it understands, or can it understand? And it was very interesting because we were able to take entire archive and bring it through every single image through the machine learning algorithms to look at the patterns of performances and the events, and the amount of information was ridiculously beautiful as an input. And then later on, we were also able to look at the 500,000 images that every single event taken in the building, which was a machine learning algorithm called ImageNet, which was designed for many surveillance systems and made there Facebook events and many things. So we basically take the same algorithm, but this time to recover every single memory of the institution and create those 3-dimensional data universes that we will see how to fly inside the memories of the building and use it on the skin of the building, kind of this imaginative material that you can compute. And the last thing was, of course, the sound. They have these 17 years of sound recordings. Mahler, Stravinsky, Bach, any imagination of many major composers and conductors have been there. To really analyze the music, we run through many machine learning algorithms, and we specify 256 individual attributes to look at the entire corpus with Parag Mittal, and each of them is representing 10 seconds of information that you can fly in the mind of a machine and pause and hear all the C keys. You can hear all Mahlers in one time, in non-linearly. And it was a really exciting moment of a kind of a machine that was ready as an instrument to make a soundtrack for near future, for the building that is recorded from. And this is really a very complex algorithm. I don't want to dive into too much, but if you're interested, happy to answer. But this is basically a very beautiful data sculptures that are completely based on the decisions of the institution last 100 years. And finally, the big question was, can a building dream, right? And that was pretty interesting speculation. What I thought is, what will happen one night, building goes online and download every single image recorded by the same hashtag, called WC Dreams. And to make it happen, the algorithm that I show you in Archive Dreaming is also the part of that. And simply, that algorithm was able to allow us to get every single image from the internet and basically collect them in one consciousness and let the building learn its own body and dream potential surfaces and dreams. And to finish my talk, I have a 4 minutes long video about this performance that I didn't able to share before. We can maybe watch it together. It's a 4 minutes, the last chapter called Dreams, and then I can say bye-bye. We can increase the sound for the last one. you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I'm very aware of the global warming, of those very issues that happen in the Design Week, please. And the good project that's coming in September 2019 Climate Summit at United Nations. And we are, of course, visualizing the problems of the world and hopefully make an impact on the minds who didn't understand very well what was happening. So thank you so much. Sorry. I wasn't there.
Let's take a seat. Let's take a seat. Now, we had a conversation last night and you revealed that the whole sort of impetus, if you like, for the project that you did on Gary's building was that you read an interview somewhere where Gary said, wouldn't it be amazing if the building could express its memories?
Yes.
Where did you read that? And was that truly the driver for that extraordinary project?
Absolutely. One of the most inspiring days that I was trying to learn about the building, its context and discourse for the city. And there was a moment that he was trying to explain the project to the city councillors. And he was also like thinking about using this specific material may allow other people to project onto itself to show the inside of the building outside. Unfortunately, some unexpected comments made him demotivated, and they didn't like approve the idea of augmenting the building back in 2002.
Right.
So it was kind of like an unfinished dream process that happened.
Because Frank Gehry himself is a renowned innovator in the world of architecture. But of course, your work is a projection. But you work with many companies that are charting the innovation to deliver an intelligent, sentient skin where we could have buildings like that in the future.
I think a beautiful question about, I think, the speculation, hopefully, the project, this caliber is hopefully allowing minds who have ready to go to find that material that can compute, energy friendly, and has like capacity of like maybe learning and maybe remembering and things like that. I think may improve our quality of life. And I mean, the tools that we use here are all from like today, like a couple of months ago. Nothing is here invented from scratch. They're already here in terms of like innovation. And I believe that light is just one of the materials that speculate this much, I guess, purposefully. But again, caring with the nature and without like a really having that larger problems of like Times Square and other like weird places where information is just a bunch of logos and...
But what blows my mind, Refik, is we often talk about the point at which machines will become sentient. So they sort of transcend human augmented kind of, reality. But how extraordinary to think that architecture and our urban environment can become sentient. That's something I've never really thought about before.
That's I think, one of the most optimist part of machine intelligence. Let's, of course, aware of what may happen, and sometimes like the idea of if machine can like decide, and if decides to have a culture and later have as art, like will we say?
Yes, because if we talk about the steps to AI, and we were doing this last night, you said something to me, you distilled it beautifully. You said a machine can learn, but it can't make decisions.
Yeah, right now.
It doesn't have a reason. It needs to be given a reason.
Exactly.
So in the steps to AI, sentient, sort of autonomous intelligence is at that point when the machine has a reason.
I think it's a beautiful question. Like we also last night discussing about one of the being human philosophically saying like we have a consciousness and we have a desire to reproduction, right? And I can build a computer in half an hour. And a machine can reproduce a computer, I believe, pretty quick. And consciousness is one of the questions as you ask, like, does machine need to decide? And decisions, and of course, other consciousness related like chapter that is the whole, I think, ethical questions of AI.
Yep.
I mean, it's in the hand of the inventors.
But the moment the machine or the environment becomes sentient, do you think there's a possibility that could turn around? It could look at humanity and go, "What's the point?"
Ooh, that would
I mean,
be sad.
that's the existential angst, isn't it?
That would be sad.
But you talk about the machine being a partner, because it's so often about humanity versus the machine. In your work, and what I find so optimistic and so uplifting about it, is you talk about the machine being the partner and the great things that we can do together.
Absolutely. I'm on the most like that positive side of optimist side of story. I hope the story ends beautiful and positive. But I think what is really exciting, the capacity of a machine enhancing our cognitive system and potentially solving problems that we know very well about, like nature and our problem of like other things.
Climate change.
Like everything that has these problems may be justified by a super simple one line of code. And we know that like it's like the fire example. Like a one line of code can cure cancer, can also make the most evil machine. We are in the same equal thinking of the. I mean, it's just it's the nature of, I guess, in technology that in the whole humankind history.
Sure.
So we can choose either way, and I'm on the other positive side of the story.
Now we're going to throw to a question in a very minute, but can I just ask you, can you just explain, I've had the great fortune of visiting your studio in LA, and you have a whole team. Can you just speak very briefly about the makeup of your team, because they all contribute to the production of your work?
Yes, very true. So I think in 2011, when I learned that in 3 weeks what I can do, I saw my capacity and I just touched the borders of, I think, my learning curve and many things. And then I decided, it's a very beautiful African proverb, like if you want to go faster, do it alone. If you're going to go further, do it together. And I believe the team is together concept of and just envisioning the future together. So I just feel like we are a kind of a machine, but it's an organic machine. Literally, we are like respectfully, we can be anyone for any reason, like totally horizontal thinking without any like biased, titles.
So do you have rocket scientists working for you, and like
literally we're not
because you got Caltech down the road, the home of rocket scientists.
That's very true, actually.
Who do you have?
For NASA GPL, we're doing a project, and we have a wonderful new engineer joined us. And then we have AI engineers, data scientists, architects, designers, and like coder, and try to be equally by men and women, and try to be very equal in the very international, 9 language in 12 people. So just try to be like a human in the 21st century, I guess.
Fantastic. Okay, so should we throw to the question up the back? Have we got a microphone there? Great.
Hi. Thanks for the presentation. I think that this gave us a very great social message, and as well visual insight about artificial intelligence. But I wanted to ask you, what do you think that this media architecture revolution will change or modify the way we live our buildings and our city?
I highly believe yes. I think like those festivals and performance and like over like last 2 decades, there's a beautiful speculation done by many architects and engineers and inventors of some like light products and many things. So it was there. But I think the concept or the context of like truly connecting with us was somehow limited. Or it was always, of course, beautifully, some interactive stories were there. But I think machine intelligence will allow us to create a new dialogue that we can talk about, a building can learn, and building can remember. And I think that's something like really wasn't available since like 2 years. So I think that's kind of hopefully an innovation that will allow us to be beyond built environments and biased physical quality of life.
Do we have another question? Down the front, thank you.
Thank you, Rafiq. In all those magnificent pieces of art that you showed us, the end consumer is a human being with auditory and visual senses, with a very limited ability to take the vast amount, a gazillionth of the amount of information. So I'm thinking, to be a true art critic of that, you need to be a machine. Can you see a time when the machine will not just be an art critic in order to truly appreciate what you've shown us, but also the end consumer of that art?
That's a beautiful question. We were having this discussion because one of a video that I was sharing recently on social network. I use social network as like a laboratory to like engage with people and understand how they feel, what they feel. And one video got so viral, and it was about machine hallucination. So the idea machine dreams, other spaces. And the comments were really interesting because the hallucination keyword probably triggered people's experience with some hallucinatives. So the critique that I'm seeing from the audience is like most about, oh, it's like this, oh, it's like that. Then we were like thinking, by the way, 2 weeks ago, OpenAI, an open source initiative about AI research, shared an incredible model. They did this, LSTM is a technique, an algorithm that can create realistic text outputs if you have a corpus of information. Let's say all the world's science fiction novels can narrate a kind of a science fiction novel. And we were thinking the similar thing. What will happen if you download every single art critic information into the mind of a machine and fly in all the critics that are not said yet, but may say it? But it's a very good question.
That's scary. Time for one more question. Do we have one? No, we don't have one. Look, oh, we do? Oh, we do, down the front. Ewan, please. Thank you.
Refik, everything that exists on the planet today is natural. The space junk, the nuclear power stations, the rainforests, the grasslands. Do you see machines as part of our nature? We seem to feel separate from them, but you don't.
I think so. I mean, I think we are also, yes, there's a space junk, which is one of the most significant problem that will be a big issue, but I think there will be also data junks, like that we are leaving behind us, like our decisions. I mean, I was just having that many funny dialogue about what will happen if you look at all the breakups in Facebook. What will happen, all the like marriages becomes like, those are our leftovers, our like literally junk that we've left behind. And what does it mean to like look at those information that but yeah, very, I think, important topic too.
On that note, we're going to wrap up the Q&A, so please join me once again in thanking Refik Anadol.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.